The Christian Television Network presents The Good Life with Bob and Molly DeAndre, featuring music, news, and special guests, building you up mentally and spiritually to help you live the good life. Now, here is your host for The Good.
We welcome to The Good Life right now Mr. Ron Wyatt, author. He's also, as a profession, an ethicist and a self-styled archaeologist. Ron, welcome to The Good Life.
Thank you, Bob. Delighted to be here.
You've written the book, Noah's Ark. Now, of course, people have been hearing about Noah's Ark for thousands of years, ever since it sailed on the seas. Of course, many people think it's a myth. Thousands and millions of people, and certainly those who don't believe in God, or don't believe in the Word of God, certainly think it's a myth. You have spent your, well, the last, 20 years of your life?
Close to it, yes.
Researching this, and you've come up with some outstanding facts that we want to share with the people today. And for you that are unbelievers that are watching today, you that really believe the Bible is a myth, please listen to this today, because if anything really brings out the truth of the Word of God, it is the discovery of Noah's Ark. And Ron, let me just ask you up front, first question, has Noah's Ark been discovered?
Yes, it has, Bob.
And you would stake everything on it?
I would stake my eternal life on it.
And we're going about now to show everyone else why you, who have been there some 24 times to Turkey, why you believe that Noah's Ark has been discovered.
Okay.
Okay. We have a model of what was discovered right here in front of us, and we have some photographs, and we're going to go to those photographs. And Ron, we're going to let you explain, maybe before we go to the photographs, explain why you got interested in Noah's Ark and why you've spent all of your money and all of your family's money and for the next generation probably going to Turkey and uncovering this.
Well, when I finally became convinced that the Bible was God's Word, I began to wonder what I could do to be effective in sharing that information with other people. Now, some folks, shall we say, speak unkindly of skeptics, but I'm probably as big a skeptic as came down the road. And so anyway, once I was convinced, I was trying to figure out how other people would become convinced. Well, in the Bible, God invites us many times to prove Him, you know.
That's right.
And put Him to the test and all this sort of thing. And a lot of times we treat religion like it's some sort of a mirage, and if we actually lay our hands on it, we're afraid it's going to evaporate and leave us without anything. But anyway, I had seen a lot of revivals and evangelistic series. People get baptized, join the church, a couple of years later, they're gone because the evangelist sometimes promises things that God hasn't promised, and things don't turn out like people expected. So anyway, I prayed and asked God what I could do that would be effective, would really be a help that He would want me to do. And I was impressed to look for the remains of Noah's Ark. So that's when I got serious about it.
What was the first thing that gave you that desire? What did you see to even think that you would look in Turkey for it?
Well, in 1959 in Life magazine, for all the world to see was this boat-shaped object. And we had, shall we say, I've been studying ancient history and archaeology since I was 15. But anyway, I was familiar with aerial photography, and this looked like a boat. And Professor Arthur Brandenberger of Ohio State University had said it was a boat, period.
This is the photograph that was in the Life
correct.
magazine. And right in the center there, it is a boat-shaped object.
Now, there are some folks that say this, you know, was a fluke of nature, but we don't feel that's true. In this picture here, this is upside down, but in the right-hand lower side, as you look at it there, are some dark objects that are protruding from the boat. These are deck support timbers. Now this is a radar scan. This is a subsurface interface radar machine similar to the X-ray machines they use for human analysis of fractures and this sort of thing. With this you can look through the earth and discover what's down there. You can tell if it's metal, if it's stone, its size, approximate size, depth in the earth. And then as we did this, we laid survey tapes out on the surface so that a person, you know, looking at these photographs could appreciate what is lying under the surface.
In what year was this done?
This was in 1985 and 1986. Now, as a result of all the research we've done over the years, and we've done this with the Turkish archaeologists also, they were right with us. They built a very nice visitor center, and as you can see, it's right above the boat formation.
It's in the left-hand corner.
That's correct.
The picture there.
And the boat's in the center, and the visitor center in the left-hand corner. Now, there are train loads and boat loads of petrified wood out here, and it's all in, you know, it is boat structure. And this piece that we're looking at here with Dr. Nathan Meyer in the right-hand side is petrified bark, and we believe that this was probably part of the covering that Noah removed to look out and see the mountains. This is one of 13 large pierced anchor stones that we have found that we believe were used to stabilize the boat in the water and to keep the nose oriented into the oncoming rough seas. Now, we have hundreds of feet of radar scans, different depths, all over the boat, around the sides, from the outside in, from the inside out. And from that, we built this model, scale model of what the boat was like before it, shall we say, became buried and fossilized out there in eastern Turkey.
Maybe we could show the people. This, of course, is the outside of it. Did you build this?
Yes, I did, sir.
It is a wonderful work of art in itself.
Well, shall we say, there are people that could do this in a hurry, and there's probably people that could have proven this to be Noah's Ark in less than 24 trips, but we just do the best we can. Now, based on the radar scan, this is the second deck. This is the upper deck. Apparently, I would say this is where Noah stayed. If I'd have been there, that's where I'd have stayed. But that's all. We're just guessing that he didn't choose another spot. All right, inside we have many chambers in here. We also have a ramp system leading from the door, and all of this is very obvious right where your hand is. This led down to the bottom decks and to the upper decks. Some of this glue I used.
I think I just messed up Noah's Ark.
No problem.
After all these thousands of years, I had to break it.
Yeah, no worry. We can stick that back in a hurry. But anyway, this was quite large enough to accommodate Noah and the animals. As a matter of fact, the tragedy of the whole story, Bob, is that it would have also accommodated a lot of people if they had you know, followed Noah's advice and gotten on the boat.
Now, how big is this?
Well, it's 515 feet long, the original. This is 1/144th, the size.
How about the width?
The width of the boat was 87.5 feet in reality. Now, this is based on the Royal Egyptian cubit, and we're told in the New Testament that Moses was skilled in all of the learning of the Egyptians. And, of course, in Revelation, John points out that the cubit being discussed between him and the angel is the cubit of the sanctuary, which was another thing that Moses had built, and that cubit was different than the Babylonian, Palestinian cubit that, you know, most of the Bible readers would have been familiar with.
How long would it take to build a boat that 515 feet by 80-some feet wide?
It would take me about 1,000 years. But I think the Bible somewhere says Noah was 120 years in building the ark. and I assumed that he had some hired help, because this is quite a undertaking.
The timbers, when we think of boat building today, we think of these little timbers, you know, that are cut and shaped and molded and all that, but that really wasn't the construction of the ark.
No, this had timbers in there. We have looked at some on the radar scan that are 20 feet through.
20 feet through?
Right, and this is massive. Now, to kind of add a little believability to this for those that haven't, you know, seen this and are not familiar
or
with
have never
radar
seen
scans,
a tree that was 20 foot through.
haven't been out to Sequoia National Park where you can drive your car right through a tree. But anyway, in some of the galleys, Roman galleys, they're keel timber. Some of those were 12, 14, and 16 feet through. And so that is something we can relate to.
And where did this mammoth timber come from?
Well, all we could do is extrapolate. And I try to avoid that because it tends to lessen your credibility. I believe that the earth was so destroyed by the flood that we would have no real way of knowing where the ark was built originally.
Where those, wherever it was, it had to have been close to a forest, because you don't just haul 20 foot through pieces of lumber, no telling how long they were.
That's correct. Now, the anchor stones are made of a type of granite that is accessible in northern Michigan. But I believe that that's all glacier scarred, and so the indications are that that wasn't open to the surface pre-flood, perhaps. But again, I don't think...
So you don't think Noah built it in northern Michigan?
I don't know that he didn't, but I certainly don't know that he did.
Right. Now, there are many, many other things, these anchor stones, but you've discovered other things. In fact, your wife was telling me in the back about finding some animal hairs.
That's right.
Now, what did you do? You took core drillings and went down into this?
That's correct. We were able, by the subsurface interface radar system, to find chambers that were intact. Some of them are filled with this old mud flow and decayed lava flow that the boat is covered in, but some of them are still open. And so we were allowed to do a core drill into one of these chambers. And so anyway, she was fishing back in there with her arm and came out with this piece of petrified wood that had an animal hair in it. And shall we say, she was very excited. Now, we found an animal antler also, and I was allowed to bring the base of it. In the petrification process, it had cracked. And so I was allowed to bring the base of it back to try to determine what animal it came from. And all I can say is that it's of the antelope family. But
now, the condition of it now, of course, doing all the x-rays and all of that, but it's still covered.
That's correct.
There are a few beams that are protruding out. But other than that, everything else is covered. Is it going to stay that way, or will the Turkish government allow this? Now, Turkey is a Muslim country.
Yes.
How do they feel about this relative to the Bible?
Well, they're delighted with this. See, the Quran mentions the flood and Noah's Ark, and also the Quran states that every true Muslim must believe every true prophet. And if they don't believe every true prophet, they're not a true Muslim. Well, Musa, or Moses, is one of the very greatest of the prophets that they recognize, and of course he told the story of the flood and Noah's Ark. So they believe it. In fact, they believe it much quicker than people in the West do, because, say for example, they haven't been exposed to a lot of the tall tales that we have that later are, shall we say, shown to be less than honest. And so anyway, they are more easily convinced by the facts than some people that have been calloused by.
Now, will it stay in this condition, or are there future plans to uncover more of this and actually expose the interior of Noah's Ark?
We have a permit. I was given a permit to build a covering over the Ark. Say, for example, all of this fossilized material, this petrified wood and other materials that are in there, if we take this covering off of it and expose it to the freezing and thawing that takes place at this particular site, it would degenerate or deteriorate very, very quickly. So in order to excavate it, we first have to house it, or at least house the portion that we're excavating. And I'm hopeful that we can, we've had a little problem coming up with the funds to do this. But anyway, God owns the universe, and I believe that when he's ready, that things will, shall we say, work out. But there are plans afoot to excavate this front end section. That is the best preserved area, and it is more easily accessible than some of the other parts of the boat.
And you've been issued a permit by the Turkish government
Yes.
to go ahead and do this?
Yes, and we have architectural drawings of the proposed covering and all of this sort of thing. Of course, in Turkey, sometimes the government changes, the cabinet changes, and this sort of thing. So each time you go back, it's necessary to reconfirm your permit.
Sure.
But I have found the Turkish authorities very easy to work with, very cooperative, very straightforward. They don't have any hidden agendas. And so it's been a pleasure for me to work with these people.
Now, what is the condition of the ship? The ship isn't like this at this point. Is it not been, I guess, through the years, kind of laid open?
Exactly, yes. I think the term is splayed, but you're right. On a boat, the gunwales are tipped outward anyway. And so as it decays, it would tend to splay or spread more. So what has happened, the back end of the boat, or the stern, or the front of the prow, are more sturdily constructed, so they tend to maintain their shape. But in the center of the boat, along the straight side, there are less support, and so they have splayed more than the front end has, and so you end up with a kind of an almond-shaped object out there. But when you take into consideration the height that the Bible gives of 50 cubits and the, or rather of 30 cubits, and the width of 50 cubits, and the degree of splaying that's taken place, it all fits perfectly.
It fits perfectly.
Exactly.
No question about it.
No.
This is, I would guess, in my way of thinking, is equally important as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Has there ever been any kind of writing found, or was there any kind of writing in Noah's day?
There's inscriptions that date back to the Urartuan, the Sumerian period, and to the Hittite period. There are inscriptions in their hieroglyphics and in their cuneiform style of writing that identifies this as Noah's Ark and the anchor stones as part of the Ark. However,
can you show on this model where the anchor stones would be, and the purpose of it, and how big, how heavy are these anchor
well,
stones?
they're about 8,000 pounds in that range. They're 10 feet tall, 6.5 feet wide, and they, at the top, they're 18 inches, and then they get thicker as they go towards the bottom.
That would sink most boats.
This is true, yes. And we found 13, and it's probable that there will be a total of somewhere around 20.
They're not all that big, though, are they?
They're all the same size.
Oh, they're
that
all
we
the
have
same
found.
size?
Yes. Now, this is extrapolation or speculation, and I try to make it clear when I'm speculating.
So that's 80,000 pounds of approximately of anchor stones.
Right, yes. So I built a model of the Ark and put it in a flowing stream and built little mountains of different shapes and let this model float past to see what shape would allow the boat to come to land. This was just something so I would have an idea of where this boat formation would have brought the boat to land. And I found that a crescent-shaped mountain oriented to the north east or the southeast would bring the boat into land. But what I noticed with this model was that it would just spiral and spin around in the eddies and, you know, in the little waves in the water. And the thought hit me, these people had to be seasick for that 150 days that they were out there in that, you know, in the seas. And I decided they'd have to have some method of preventing this. Well, a drogue anchor will do this. Now, modern sailors use a sea sock. It's kind of like the air socks you see out at the airport to indicate wind direction, but they throw this off the stern into the water, and the, shall we say, the current going through that keeps the back end downstream and the front end into the waves. So I assume that these things were suspended from these protrusions back here. I don't know what else these could possibly be for, but they could be for something else, but they are on the boat. Now my guess is, since they are at the stern, that some of these anchor stones were placed there. Now, we were diving for chariot parts in the Red Sea, and I had a diver with me that had just finished his training. Well, he was on the side of the boat ready to jump in, and we were all set to stabilize the boat. A wave came up just as he was fixing to go in, and he thought, well, hey, I won't have to jump so far to get in the water. I'll just drop on top of this wave. Well, he dropped off just as the wave hit the boat, and just a matter of a second later, we were bottom side up. All of our gear was, you know, floating downward. So anyway, if a wave hits the side of the boat and there's nothing there to hold it, it will tip it over. So I assume that probably some of these were placed along the side, so if a wave hit it, yes, this shock would be...
There must have been some mammoth rope or something to hold these.
Yes, on these...
Maybe you'll find
these,
some of this.
We have found an indication that you're exactly right. The holes in the anchor stones, on the one face, the hole is 7 inches in diameter. On the opposite face, it's 5 inches in diameter. Inside the hole, it's 9 inches in diameter. So it appears that they tied a knot in this cord and threaded it through from the large 7-inch diameter hole, and of course it wouldn't pass through the 5-inch side. When it got wet and swelled, it would fill up this 9-inch cavity inside, and this would prevent chafing. It would prevent the rope from wearing in too. So this gives us an idea that the cord was probably like 5 inches in diameter. And
very intelligent, a very intelligent race of people.
Well, it says that God gave him instructions about building the ark, and I tell you, when I see the things, and I'm sure there's a lot that I've missed, but I stay goosebumps a lot of the time when I'm out there working on this.
And when do you plan on going back again?
Well, we plan to go back probably in August or September.
Of this year?
Yes.
You don't spend a lot of time in your profession, do you?
Well, we work with some very nice folks when I'm home and available. I take call and do cases and this sort of thing. And shall we say, for the last several years, they've been willing to allow me to do this, so I'm able to make a living and to get some of this stuff done too. So
absolutely amazing. Is there anything else I'm sure we've both missed a lot of things, but is there anything else you want to share about the Ark before we go on to another subject that is just as exciting as this that you've been involved with?
Well, one of the things that I think is quite significant, and there are people, you know, that don't believe the Bible. And if we had a few minutes with these folks, I'm sure they would have a change of heart, because the Bible is the most scientifically accurate book that I have found anywhere. And anyway, the Bible tells us in Psalms 106 that he covered the earth as with a garment, you know, with the flood waters. Right. And we're told that it covered even the highest mountains to 15 cubits and upward. Well, if you put all of the water that is available to our planet on the surface, the very maximum depth above present sea level that you could reach would be 9,000 feet. Okay, and so this would eliminate these volcanic mountains such as Ararat. There was not enough water to place the boat on there, and the seismic and volcanic activity that would be required to raise this mountain that high would have destroyed a wooden structure, would have disintegrated it. And so there's a lot of scientific reasons for believing that it would not be on a post-flood volcanic peak, shall we say.
How far from Ararat is this location?
About 12 miles.
About 12 miles.
Yes.
So you can.
It depends on where you measure from.
And it's up at the elevation of 6,300
feet. Yes.
The book is called Discovered Noah's Ark by Ron Wyatt. I'm not sure where that can be obtained. I don't know if this
World
is
Bible Society has it
Society.
in Nashville, Tennessee, and there's a lot of Christian bookstores that have this.
All right. Well, all you people watching in Nashville, you go right down there to the World Bible Society and you can get that book, simply called Noah's Ark Discovered. And it is a fascinating, let me just tell you, I read through it and I was just fascinated by it.
Well, thank you, Bob.
Just beautiful. Now let's talk about an equally fascinating subject, and this subject I understand because of the sensitivity of it, that there are some things that Ron can't say. And, well, I won't press him for those kind of answers. And it's about the Ark of the Covenant. See, Ron not only has spent his life doing this, but in other things also, as he told you a little glimpse of diving for chariot parts in the Red Sea. But also, you've been very interested in Israel and the Ark of the Covenant. Now, where did you get that desire to find where the Ark of the Covenant is?
Well, Bob, this is probably where some of my scientific friends and yours that are watching out here may wonder about my mental condition. I'm not given to salubrious soliloquies and sepulchral solicitudes. I try to stick to facts. But I was walking past the Calvary Escarpment with an Israeli official that, shall we say, was in a position where he could give me a permit to excavate. All right. And as I was walking by talking about Roman antiquities, suddenly my arm pointed to this unpromising looking hole in the base of this Calvary Escarpment, and my mouth said, "That's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is in there." Well, he started saying, "That's wonderful. We'll give you a permit to excavate. We'll provide you a place to stay, your food, do your laundry, and all of this." Well, I was absolutely stunned because the thought had never crossed my mind to look for the Ark of the Covenant.
Do you think this was a sovereign move of God, that a one-time thing that happened to you?
I think
you
so.
never had an experience like that before?
No, I have not. Nor since. No.
And, I mean, the Israeli government just doesn't give permits like that.
That is exactly right. So if the Holy Spirit hadn't been there, this man, the normal reaction would have been, sure.
Right.
Why not, or something like that. But for him to make all of those very generous and untypical offers was another indication that God was in that.
And what year did this happen?
This was in 1978.
78.
Yeah, we had gone over to retrieve chariot parts from the sea, and I was kind of a novice at diving, scuba diving, and I had concluded that if I were 30 feet under the water, you know, scoping out these chariot parts to see which would be the easiest to get to the surface, that the sun wouldn't bother me. Well, it didn't work out that way. Those ultraviolet rays penetrate a great distance, and I got blistered, my feet and legs swelled up, so I wasn't able to scuba dive anymore. So I was up in Jerusalem. Now, this was during the time that the Israelis had occupied the peninsula, so you could go all up and down through there from Israel. Anyway, I was up there feeling very rained on when this happened. And, you know, we're told to test the spirits. Well, I knew that some supernatural being had influenced what I had done and said. But Satan can do some rather spectacular things too, so I just kind of told the man, well, you know, I'll come back later and do that. Well, I was thinking, man, I've got to get home and start doing some research and figure out if, you know, that really could be true. And so we went back and did our research. That perked up my feelings a little bit there. And one of the stories that we have in here about this red-headed gentleman that I met in the garden tomb, that perked it up, because that was the divine appointment.
Right. What year did you go back and convince yourself that this could be the tomb?
In 1979, we started excavating.
The next year you went back?
Yes.
And how many people were a part of this excavation?
Well, we have had groups up to 10 in number that have worked on the project.
Was Dr. Strange part of that group? Dr. Strange from the University of South Florida?
Dr. Strange was in the process of opening a cave at Engedi in 1979. So I met him and worked with him there. And nice gentleman that he is, he said, Ron, he says, you can help me dig anytime you want to. I'm one of these folks that believe, you know, that in order to get into a cave, you have to expend a certain amount of energy, and the sooner you do that, the sooner you get in there. So he seemed to appreciate that. But he's a nice gentleman, but we didn't work on this together.
We didn't work on that project together. He's been a guest of ours a number of times.
Oh, all right.
That's the only reason I saw his name mentioned in your book. You uncovered this in 1979.
Well, we began the excavation, and just like I've been to Turkey 24 times, I've been to this place a similar number of times. My efficiency is, shall we say, lacking, and the funds. I have two things that I look for before I go and do any excavating. That is, I ask God for some signal that I'm supposed to go there and dig, and I have to have the money. And I have found that both of these show up at the same time on a regular basis.
And how many times have you been back to this place and been digging?
You'd have to ask my wife, but it's pushing 20.
20 times back in Israel digging.
And now, we're working on some other things out there too.
Because I don't want to probe and ask you questions that you can't answer. Just go ahead and tell us all that you can about the Ark of the Covenant, the discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, and what you have seen.
Okay, Bob. Now, in Jeremiah, the 16th chapter, in the 19th through the 21st verse, it says there that God is going to call all of the Gentiles to him. And if my understanding of that term is correct, this means unbelievers. And shocking as it may seem to some, now I thought I believed in Noah's Ark. There's no explanation for my going out there and spending the money and my vacation to look if I hadn't believed. But when I saw it, my physiological response was not that of somebody that believed. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I got goosebumps, lightheaded and all of this, and you don't act that way if you really believe this.
It was a process of believing, maybe.
Yes. So anyway, we find that even a lot of church members can be included in this term as a non-believer. And maybe we believe something that isn't true.
Right.
A lot of folks believe Christ was coming in '88, and I talked to these people. They were very honest people. But it's possible for honest people to be mistaken. So anyway, God is going to do something, he says, in that text that will show the world that he is the Lord. Now then, there's upwards of 5 billion people that we share our planet with here, and all of us apparently love to trash things around because it's getting to be a mess. But anyway, if you think of what it would take to convince Buddhists, Hindus, all of these different people that Christ is indeed the Lord, the Messiah, and our Savior, it has to be something mind-boggling. Now then, if God reveals the remains of Noah's Ark, the chariot parts in the Red Sea, the real Mount Sinai, the remains of giants, the Ark of the Covenant. This will get people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we put on programs in churches from time to time, and I go to places where I figure I will get the most, shall we say, sarcasm. And, you know, because if what I'm doing won't stand up under this, then I'd better just stick to giving anesthesia.
Right.
You know. And God says, prove me. Well, okay, we do that. We go right into the lion's den, university programs and stuff like that. Anyway, God's Holy Spirit can make these people do a 180.
Mm-hmm.
Professors that didn't believe a thing about Noah's Ark or any of this stuff, when I get through, and I use the show and tell technique. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't believe something if I couldn't see it in most instances, so I show them videos of this stuff and then give them my opinion of what the significance is. But on the Ark of the Covenant, as exciting and shocking as Noah's Ark is, the scenario that took place out there is the greatest single witness that could ever be shared, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Now, as we dug down the face of that escarpment, we found 3 cutouts in the wall, like recessed bookshelves, except there was no shelves in there. Mm-hmm. Well, we know that this is where ancient peoples posted signs that gave certain information. Now, we know that crucifixion sites during the Roman period, all of the providences where they ruled, they had specific locations that they crucified people in. This was an intimidation process. It was done at the most public site available outside a city, and particularly in Jerusalem, this was done outside the city to avoid, you know, some of the fanatical activities of the priests should they do it in the city. So anyway, in this Calvary escarpment are these cutouts. 12 feet below these cutouts is a cross hole. Now, I believed when I found this that that was the crucifixion site, but I had no idea where the Ark of the Covenant was, except I had gone down where my hand had pointed, and I was exploring the face of this escarpment to try to find somewhere where I could get in, because I assumed it was in a cave there. Now, we ended up having to go off to the side and down through a cave system, and I finally squirmed into the chamber that had the Ark of the Covenant in it on January 6, 1982 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had quite an experience there. I just lost it for 45 minutes. I just passed out. I didn't see any visions or anything, but it was just more than this computer could handle, because when Christ was crucified, it says the rocks were rent. There was an earthquake. Well, what happened? A crack came right down the face of that escarpment, right down to the left side of the cross hole, 20 feet through solid limestone into the chamber where the Ark of the Covenant was. Now, when somebody is dead and their spleen is relaxed, it'll hold approximately 3 liters of blood. Also, when the blood stops pumping around, it will, the red blood cells, white blood cells, and this sort of thing will float to the top, and the serum is heavier, so it stays in the bottom. So the description of the Roman soldier piercing the side of Christ and the blood and water coming out could only mean that he pierced the spleen or the heart. But in the side, it would more likely have been the spleen. Well, this blood came out and water and went down through that crack onto the mercy seat. And this ark had been hidden there 600 years before Christ was crucified. Well, in the sacrificial system, and in Psalm 77:13, it says, "Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary."
Even as you're talking about it, I see something taking place in you as you're even explaining this to me now.
Well, that God would go to all that trouble for us. It just places a new value on human life. And Bob, we have some critics, bless their hearts. If I had the background that they have and their experiences, I would be the critic also. So, you know, God...
Can you tell us what you saw there, Ron?
Well, the Ark of the Covenant, and if you'll look in 2 Kings, the 25th chapter, it gives a list of all of the utensils and furnishings from the temple that were carried to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar's army. Now in Ezra, it gives a list that Darius, the Medo-Persian king, sent back. They're identical. All the things that are missing from that list that were part of the material in the temple, Solomon's temple, are in this chamber, or were in this chamber. Now, in the Middle East, you know yourself by watching the news that if this Ark of the Covenant is suddenly brought out and the Muslim world becomes aware that the Israelis are in possession of the Ark of the Covenant, there will be bloodshed that we wouldn't believe. Now, we see some folks that are, I guess the term we would use is fanatic. But some people, when it comes to a religious belief of theirs, their eyes just glaze over, and it doesn't matter if they're killed or what. They just do whatever they feel is the thing for them to do in that circumstance. And so anyway, there is a process in place now to get this so everybody can see it without triggering that kind of destruction. And a part of that process was when they allowed the Hasidic Jews to cut a stone from a quarry and dub it the first stone of the third temple. And they were given a permit to take this down to the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, and install it there. And so anyway, when they approached the Western Wall with this stone, the Arabs rioted, the Jews rioted, they had to tear gas the whole crowd to keep people from killing each other. And so if that happened because of a stone that was just symbolic of the third temple, what would be the reaction if the Ark of the Covenant were presented? And so I am so grateful that the people that are responsible for bringing this to public awareness are folks that are motivated logically and that they care, they are concerned about what can happen.
How many people have been where you were and have seen what you've seen?
Well, there's been several that have been in the dig and seen the cutouts, the cross holes, but I'm the only one that has been in the chamber with the Ark of the Covenant to this point in time. Now, I have a very good friend that is a mountain climber. He's climbed places in Turkey. He does things that I wouldn't think about doing. Anyway, he's a man I felt I could trust, and so I showed him how to get in. Well, he disappeared into this water-eroded tunnel going into the chamber, and he was gone for about 30 minutes. Well, I assumed that he was in there taking pictures and all of this. Well, after 30 minutes, he came back out, and the man was absolutely terrified. He had proceeded a little ways along the tunnel, got stuck, and he couldn't go forward or backward. And he said, I thought I was going to die in that tunnel. And we couldn't even get him back down in the dig after that. He'd work on top and carry the buckets of debris over to where we dumped them, but he wouldn't go back in there. And we have made 3 attempts to let other people that I trusted go in there, and for one reason or the other, they have not been successful. Now, when the angels came to Sodom, and Lot, was hospitable to them, at the point where these men were getting physical, and Lot was out there, and they were about to trash him and break into the house and get these angels that they thought were young men, the angels pulled Lot in, and it says that they blinded the men of Sodom so that they wearied themselves looking for the door. Now, I always thought that they just struck these people blind. But put yourself there. If you were suddenly struck blind, you'd lose interest in whatever
Right.
and start groping your way back home. So I believe that they just simply made it impossible for those folks to see the door. How they did it, I don't know. But until the moment that God wants the Ark of the Covenant revealed, I believe that nobody is going to be able to show it. Something that important that has the witness that does with the crucifixion of Christ, his blood on the mercy seat, just like the pattern in the earthly sanctuary.
Are the Israeli officials aware of all of this? In other words, you haven't done any of this on your own without them?
There are some things that are reality, Bob, that we have to deal with. Now, I know this people say, well, he's sticking his nose in where it doesn't belong. The Contra affair and the missiles in this, Colonel North, we give our president the job of protecting our country, okay? Now then, if they share the information with Congress, with the committees of Congress that are supposed to be by law notified of these things, it always leaks every time without fail. You see what I'm saying? And while it's dangerous to give somebody power to do things without any checks or balances, if this man is responsible for protecting our country and he's got blabbermouths that he has to tell this to, he can't do that, you see. And so this is part of the reality. Well, in Israel, there are people that are blabbermouths. And the people that know about this have to keep it quiet for the simple reason that if they did not, it would get all over. And I will say this, that one man that was going to blow the whistle on all of this operation was mysteriously killed by a bullet in the back of the head by an Arab terrorist. And if you want to believe it was an Arab terrorist, you know, that's your privilege. But in this part of the world, these people deal with realities. And for that reason, I like to work with them. I don't want to see anybody get killed. But better that one person than thousands of innocent Arabs and Israelis.
Do you have plans of going back?
Well, shall we say, things are in progress that I hope will lead to all of these things that we're working on being totally presented to the public in video, and go and look yourself if you want to by the end of the year.
By the end of 1990?
This is my hope. Now then, I hope that Christ will come in the next couple of years. I hope. But if he doesn't, I'm not going to give up and quit.
Right.
And if these things, if we're not able to share all of this in 1990, like I hope, I'm not going to give up and quit. So if that is an understandable way of presenting it, that is the situation as I see it.
Most fascinating life that you lead, without question. And apparently you have seen things, God has shared things with you that probably hasn't any other person on earth. Do you have any idea why? I'm sure you've asked God why.
Well, say, for example, Bob, you found Noah's Ark. Nathan Meyer found the Ark of the Covenant, or vice versa. Jim Strange, Dr. Jim Strange, found the chariots in the Red Sea, and somebody else found the other things. That is in the realm of human possibility. You know, it's surprising, it's shocking, it's fantastic, but it's believable. Let me ask you honestly, you've met me here for a few minutes and that, do you think that it's humanly possible for me to find all these things that God is sharing?
Absolutely.
Not. I couldn't in 100 years.
Oh, you mean just on your own?
Right. You
No,
know.
of course not.
And so I believe that God is doing it in a manner that will remove all doubt that it is human skill or intelligence that's bringing it about.
I see.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me. And it's amazing, I do all of this, but it's totally impersonal. I don't think of myself at all I try not to, because, you know, it blows my mind. I just go around in a state of goosebumps, you know, wondering what's going to happen next.
Right.
But anyway, I'm thrilled to death to be able to work with these things. And one thing that folks can count on, and I know at this point in time, some of these things sound like I'm copping out on them, making excuses. And bless their hearts, that's what I would believe if I were in their place. But I would like folks to just hold their decisions or their conclusions until we've had a chance to show the rest of this stuff. It's like Noah's Ark. This is beyond any reasonable doubt. And there will be an excavation in the near future to remove what little doubt some folks might have on that. But anyway, I believe that God is going to show things in a manner that will convince folks that have no knowledge of him whatsoever. Now, these people in Jeremiah, 16th chapter, will say, surely our fathers have inherited lies and vanity, and we have made gods unto ourselves, and they are not gods. In order to get people to, shall we say, confess that, admit that, something spectacular has got to happen. And I believe that that's what God is doing through these things that he's preserved for us.
And this could be in 1990.
Yes.
All of these things happen. Again, I just want to thank you for coming and sharing your time, with your valuable time that you could be someplace else digging and doing more of what God has instructed you to do. Thank you. We also thank your family for putting up with
me.
With you.
They deserve a lot of thanks.
And of course your children have been with you, your wife has been with you.
That's right. My sons, bless their hearts, spent 78 days in prison in Saudi Arabia because one of our competitors on the Ark, and I don't think of this as competition. You know, I'd love to work with everybody on these things. One of them called the Saudi Arabian embassy and said Mr. Wyatt and his sons are Israeli spies. Well, that changed our status in Saudi Arabia right quickly for about 78 days. But anyway, they have had some rather hair-raising, uncomfortable experiences because of helping me with this work. And I appreciate my boys and girls and wife for all of this.
God bless you. And would you keep us up to date? I know you can't always come into the studio, but maybe by phone we could do phone interviews if things are being uncovered, things are happening. If we could keep the public up to date, anything that you would like to share with us.
I appreciate that, Bob. We are very carefully videoing, doing chemical analysis, everything that I know and the people I consult with know to prove these things. So at the moment in time when it can be done, we'll share all of this, and I promise you that you will have all the video clips on this you want.
Wonderful.
For your use.
Thank you so very much. We really do appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you, Bob.
Stay with us. We'll be back for more of The Good Life right after this.